Today's story is about two men in Canada. They met each other by pure coincidence. From the very beginning, the two of them clicked quickly and became close friends. But as time passed, it turned out that each one of them was hiding a secret from the other. In the end, those secrets were revealed, and the shock was enormous. In late 2003, there was a 22-year-old young man named Michael Bridges. He was sitting in the stands of a hockey arena in the city of Calgary, a major city in Canada. He sat there waiting for the players to enter the rink, barely believing what was happening. He was extremely happy. Michael had been given a golden opportunity to attend this game. He lived in a city called Brandon, about 1,127 kilometers away, also in Canada. The previous year had been incredibly tough for him. He had lost his job, drifted away from many of his friends, gone through severe financial hardship, and experienced a painful breakup. But suddenly, he won a free trip to attend a hockey game. So there he was in the stands, unable to believe that something positive had finally happened in his life after all the darkness he had been through. While sitting there, Michael noticed a beer vendor in the stands. He was just about to signal to order a beer when suddenly a heavy-set man with a mustache sat down next to him and said with a smile and great excitement, "I can't believe I'm here. I won this ticket in a lottery." Michael replied, surprised, "Really? Me too. I won mine in a lottery as well." The two of them then started chatting. Michael, who had lost almost all of his friends over the past year and was living in isolation, was relieved to finally have someone to talk to and break that barrier of loneliness. It seemed that the man felt the same way toward Michael. From that moment on, they became friends very quickly and began talking about their lives. After the match, the man, whose name was Brock, said to Michael, "Why don't we celebrate our team's victory together?" Michael agreed and asked where they should go. Brock suggested they go to a nightclub together, and Michael accepted. The two of them left the arena to celebrate. At the nightclub, Michael noticed something strange. From his appearance and clothes, Brock looked like a simple, ordinary man, just like Michael, yet he was spending a lot of money inside the place, paying for drinks and food, leaving generous tips, and even throwing money at the dancers as if he were a millionaire. Michael, who was struggling financially, couldn't bring himself to tell Brock, "Don't pay, I'll cover it," because he simply couldn't afford the expensive dinner, the alcohol, the beer, the tips, or the money being thrown at the dancers. So he let Brock handle the entire bill while they sat at the bar together. Michael told Brock that he didn't want to return to his city, Brandon, because he was happy there with him and didn't want to leave. He was living alone and had no friends in Brandon. Brock, surprised, replied, "Well, that's lucky for me. I'm actually transferring my job to Brandon." Michael was overjoyed. He had found a new friend who would be living in the same city as him. He offered to help Brock find an apartment there, and Brock replied, "Great, and I'll help you find a good job." Michael looked at the bundle of cash Brock pulled out to pay for the night and said, "All right, it's a deal." 2 months later, in early December 2003, Brock actually moved to Brandon. One day, Michael was riding next to Brock in his car as they were driving around the city together. After that, Brock was taking Michael home, and while they were on the way, Brock's phone suddenly rang. From the way Brock spoke on the phone, Michael realized he was talking to his boss at work. After Michael had helped him find an apartment, Brock, in return, had promised to get him a job at the company he worked for, and indeed, he began giving Michael work to do. Michael never expected that this would be the kind of work Brock would give him. He had assumed it would be a normal job, but he soon discovered that the work was suspicious. Brock made him deliver packages and warned him firmly, "Never open them." Michael felt uneasy about the whole thing. It was very clear that this was shady or illegal work. But when he remembered how Brock used to throw money around at the nightclub, he wanted to have that kind of money too. So, he decided to try the job. He delivered the packages, nothing happened, everything seemed safe, and he began making deliveries regularly. Michael had no idea what was inside those packages, but he started to feel deeply involved and trapped. He remembered Brock's warning never to open any of them. He wanted to back out, but he was afraid to walk away from the situation. A few days later, Brock called him and said he wanted him to deliver another package. Michael agreed, unable to refuse, because he desperately needed the money. One day, Michael was sitting in the car with Brock when Brock received another call from his boss. Michael could hear Brock speaking, and suddenly, Brock's face changed. It was as if he had accepted something unavoidable. He said into the phone, "Okay, I'll take care of it right now." He ended the call abruptly, without saying a single word to Michael. He turned the car around and started driving fast in the opposite direction. A few minutes later, Brock pulled into the parking lot of a small hotel. A motel. Michael was still trying to understand what was happening and asked himself, "Why are we here?" But Brock turned to him and said, "You're staying here." He got out of the car and walked toward the door of one of the motel rooms, knocking on it. Michael remained sitting in the car, completely confused. Suddenly, the door Brock was knocking on opened, and a woman came out of the room. From her reaction, she looked extremely shocked and startled when she saw Brock. She tried to slam the door shut in his face, but Brock stuck his arm out and stopped her. They began arguing loudly. Michael couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could see the fight unfolding in front of him, and it was clearly escalating fast. He started looking around nervously, afraid someone might see them, because what was happening could lead to serious trouble. Suddenly, as he watched, Michael saw Brock raise his fist and punch the woman hard in the face. She collapsed to the ground instantly. Michael was frozen in shock, unable to react. He stayed seated, watching as Brock got on top of her and kept hitting her repeatedly in the face until it was covered in blood. After he was done, Brock stood up, closed the motel room door as if nothing had happened, and walked back to the car. He got in next to Michael without saying a single word. Michael stayed silent the entire drive, not even knowing how to start a conversation. Now Michael was certain that Brock was involved in criminal activity, and since Michael had been helping him deliver the packages, that meant he was now an accomplice in whatever crimes Brock had been committing. Until that moment, Michael had believed the job was harmless, but after what he had witnessed with his own eyes, he realized how wrong he had been. When they arrived outside Michael's building, Brock finally spoke. He looked Michael straight in the eyes and said, "Don't you ever open your mouth and tell anyone about what you saw." Michael replied quietly, "Okay, I won't tell." He got out of the car quickly and ran into his apartment. About a week later, Michael was sitting at home when his phone rang. He looked at the screen and saw that it was Brock calling. At first, Michael didn't want to answer, but in the end, he told himself he had to. Despite everything that had happened and what he had witnessed with his own eyes at the motel when Brock assaulted that woman, Michael hadn't told anyone about what he saw, but it deeply unsettled him. Why? Because he felt he had become dangerously entangled with Brock, far more than he should have, and he no longer knew how to get away from him. Still, he tried to reassure himself that, so far, everything was going fine. Nothing had happened to him, and as long as he followed instructions and obeyed orders, there was nothing to worry about. The moment Michael answered the call, Brock didn't even say hello. He got straight to the point and said, "There's a new delivery if you're still interested in working with us." Michael knew he should refuse. He knew he should stop getting involved in this shady business, keep the money he had already made, and look for a normal job before he sank deeper into this mess and became trapped. But at the same time, he was scared. Scared that if he said no, Brock might do to him what he had done to the woman at the motel. And on top of that, Michael desperately needed the money. After a few tense moments of silence, Michael agreed. Brock sounded pleased and told him that his boss, the big leader, was very happy with him because he had kept quiet and said nothing. Then he ended the call. Even though Michael felt a brief sense of relief from Brock's words of praise, he was still afraid, hesitant, and painfully aware that he was trapped in a situation he couldn't escape. He grabbed his car keys, left his apartment, and went out to deliver the package on time. Over the next 2 months, things seemed to return to a kind of uneasy normality. Michael continued making deliveries for Brock on a regular basis, and they often had lunch together at a restaurant in Brandon. Brock always paid the bill. One day, while they were sitting in a small restaurant, Michael noticed that Brock seemed restless. He was shaking his leg and tapping his hand on the table, clearly nervous. Michael looked at him and asked, "Are you okay?" Brock replied, "I'm perfectly fine." Then he leaned in and said, "Michael, I have an offer that will change your life." Michael became excited and asked, "What is it?" Brock told him that he and his boss believed Michael had proven himself to be trustworthy, not only because he stayed silent about the motel incident, but also because they were confident he had never looked inside any of the packages he delivered. Because of that, Brock wanted to introduce him to the boss himself. He said that if the boss liked him, he might move Michael to a better position, promote him, make him something like a manager, give him more responsibility, and a much higher salary. Michael felt torn. He was excited and nervous at the same time, happy at the thought of being promoted and making a lot of money, but terrified of meeting the boss because he had heard that the man could be violent with anyone who crossed him. But Brock added one condition. Before meeting the boss, Michael would have to pass a test. He had to prove that he wasn't just a delivery guy. He had to prove that he was tough, that his heart was hard. In other words, Brock was telling him that he had to be a killer, ruthless and brutal, just like what he had seen Brock do to the woman at the motel. After laying out the condition, Brock folded his arms and leaned back in his chair, waiting to see how Michael would react. Michael was stunned. He didn't understand what Brock expected him to do exactly in order to prove himself worthy of the promotion. Would he have to choose the test himself, or would Brock assign him a specific task? Before Brock could say another word, Michael suddenly remembered something from his past, something horrific. He decided to tell Brock about it. He believed that this story would serve as proof, both for Brock and for his boss, that he was strong, capable, and able to handle whatever task they might give him. So Michael looked Brock straight in the eyes, confidence in his gaze, and began telling him his story. And as he continued, Brock's eyes grew wider and wider in shock. When Michael finished telling his story, Brock said to him, "After everything you've told me, you've proven that you're ready to meet the boss." A few days later, Michael went to a luxurious hotel in a nearby city, the place where he was supposed to meet the boss, the leader. As soon as he entered the lobby, he saw Brock waiting for him. Brock stood up, smiled, and said, "Come with me." They went up together to a room in the hotel. It wasn't just a room, it was a very luxurious suite, but it was completely empty. Michael was surprised by how empty the place was, and asked, "Where is the boss?" Brock replied calmly, "The boss doesn't wait for anyone. People wait for him. Sit down, he'll be here any moment." Michael sat down and tried to stay calm, but he was extremely nervous and couldn't hide it. He was afraid the boss wouldn't be convinced by his story and would decide that he wasn't worthy of the promotion, leaving him as nothing more than a package courier. Michael desperately wanted to be promoted and earn more money, just like Brock, who used to spend huge amounts of cash in front of him at the nightclub. At the same time, he was terrified that if the boss decided he wasn't good enough, the situation wouldn't just end there. The boss might even order Brock to get rid of him, just like what happened to the woman at the motel. Michael sat there, overwhelmed with fear, unsure of what his fate would be. Brock noticed how tense he was and tried to calm him down. He said, "Come on, tell me the story again, like a rehearsal before the boss arrives. I want you to tell it with confidence. If the boss sees you hesitating or shaking while you're telling the story, he'll think you made it all up, and that won't end well for you." Michael agreed and began telling the story again, from the beginning, this time with more confidence. As soon as he finished, there was a knock on the door. Brock said, "The boss is here. Are you ready?" Michael replied, "I'm ready." Brock went to open the door. The moment Michael looked to see who was standing outside, he was stunned. He instantly realized that he had made a massive mistake. The people standing at the door were not the boss. They were the police. At that moment, Michael understood that he had fallen into a very carefully planned trap. Everything that had happened over the past months had been an act, staged specifically for him. The contest he had supposedly won, which sent him to the hockey game, was fake. Everything had been arranged so that he would meet Brock at the arena and become friends with him. The packages he had been delivering never contained anything dangerous. They were filled with ordinary flour. The woman he saw being beaten at the motel was an actress, and she hadn't been seriously harmed. The blood he saw on her face was fake. Capsules of artificial blood hidden in her mouth, designed to burst when Brock struck her, making the assault look real. The only real part of the entire story was this: Brock was indeed working for a secret organization, but not a criminal gang, as Michael believed. He was working for the Canadian police. Brock was an undercover officer who had set an elaborate sting operation to get Michael to confess to his crime, and Michael did exactly that. In front of hidden cameras inside the hotel suite, Michael confessed that he had murdered his girlfriend, Irene Sherney, 2 years earlier. When she tried to leave him, he strangled her until she lost consciousness, then drowned her in the bathtub. That was the story he had told Brock, and the same story he was planning to tell the boss, to prove that he was their man, strong enough and willing to do anything they asked. He wanted them to believe that he had killed before, and that he was ready to kill again if ordered. After his confession, when the knock came at the door, he expected to see the crime boss, Instead, the police entered, arrested him, and charged him with the murder he had just confessed to. The entire confession was recorded, both audio and video. Police later found Irene's body at the location where Michael had dumped it, in a waste disposal site. Michael was convicted of her murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. And that's where our story comes to an end. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. And goodbye.